Rhodes Scholar. He doesn't get anything done with it.
I wonder if you're horizontal. I wonder.
No.
Doesn't look like that.
Come on in.
Like something
It's
new.
subject today. We saw you guys. You know, she started listening.
Hey, how are you?
You what?
Hi.
Says Blue Line is live.
doing?
Yeah. They're talking about it. We're talking about that. Can you come a little bit closer?
Yeah, give me a sec.
Well, we've been busy.
No, not you.
No, we're
Come a
gonna
little closer, Hal.
That's the wrong permit.
No. I think we signed everything. That's right, we signed it. We signed it, but we've got last minute stuff.
This is
So before the photographer comes, like we're going tomorrow. So we're getting there. That's what last week we had to turn.
Okay.
So it was like.
I can't see the picture, so.
3 days of her outlaw. My outlaw. I think that's pretty good.
If you're happy, I'm happy.
Nice.
Turn your volume down, please.
That sounds like a fun trip.
How about if I just turn it off?
There's a good idea. Hi, everybody.
I brought your
I am
book
tired.
back. I got what I wanted out of it.
It's Pam and Ellen. Pam and Ellen Conroy.
She had a concert. They both had a concert. All right.
Oh.
I got a pen. I don't have any paper. You don't have an extra pad, do you?
But I found that I already had one at home.
I need a pad of paper.
There was a King James
I wrote
version,
notes on little
but it
pieces
was
of
a
paper.
witnessing or like why you believe. You know how they have a commentary or different
Oh, yeah.
stuff. And I forget which one it was, and it was like, it was a King James.
Well, can't have too many King James, I guess.
I can
Did you
because
read
they're so
all
big.
this, Mr. Rick?
Yes.
Did you get all this? I got what I wanted.
Good.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right.
We've
Phone's
got about
ready.
1 minute, and I do not want any discussion, or I don't want this labored on. Just want to touch when we talked about different translations of the Bible and why it's important that you know what you're reading. I'm not telling you which one to read, but just for an example, this is the New World Translation, King James. And let me read to you just one verse out of the book of John, the Gospel of John. In the beginning was the Word, that's good, and the Word was with God. See a problem there? And the Word was a God. Yeah.
Yes.
We've read that.
So it's just little things like that you have to watch out for. And you have to know what verses to look for. But now there would change your whole theology.
The whole concept
That
of
God is no longer God. He's no longer the supreme architect of the
A God.
universe. There's no longer a triune God. There's just many gods.
Agreed.
So just that's the only thing I'm saying is just be careful.
Yeah, is that a Jehovah's Witness Bible?
Yeah.
New
Okay.
World Translation.
But now they'll jump up and down and swear to you it's King James.
Oh,
But it is King James, but what they've done is that they've just gone through and changed some words.
they changed everything. A lot of words.
Yeah, a lot of words, but
Yeah.
you have to know where to look.
Yeah.
And the other thing that's, I think, puzzling or entertaining to me is that they will update their translations every so many years.
Yes.
So when they knock on my door or they meet me outside, I love to have them knock on my door or meet me outside. They'll say, we want to read to you out of the King James Bible. And I say, which translation? And they say, well, it's the King James translation. I said, no, which New World Translation? Well, what do you mean? This one is a newer one. It was translated in 2013. But I have some New World Translations that are in the 40s, 1940s, and I think I have one in the 50s. And you would be surprised if your eyes will get tired going back and forth, but there's a lot of differences, so just be careful.
NIV is the same way,
Yeah. So,
version way.
thank you for letting me borrow that.
I didn't let you borrow.
You can have it back.
Did he steal that from you, Hal?
It's not mine.
It's not Hal's?
So I think we are at the beginning of chapter 3,
Chapter 3. Okay.
I believe.
Belief.
If you're watching us, welcome. And we understand we have several people that are watching us from College Arms. We have some from New York, have some from the Carolinas, and I saw today where we had some from Georgia. So, chapter 3. My brethren, and what we've already learned about that word is every time the word brethren is used, we know that the writer is addressing Christians, addressing believers. This book mainly is not for the non-believers. It's not one that you would preach a revival out of. Well, I guess you could, a revival for a church. But it's not one that you would use to just preach to a general population. This is addressed specifically to the church. And James was addressing it specifically to the church in Jerusalem. And we've already reviewed that we know that in that first century church, there were converted Jews and there were Gentiles, and you can already begin to see the clash there. My brethren, be not many masters, or have not many masters. There should not be many teachers. Those who teach will come under a strict set of rules, a strict judgment, just like pastors and preachers. So be careful where you are getting your teaching from. And the reason for that is the Bible goes on to say that those that are teachers among you that have passed the test and have followed the strict tenets and doctrines of the Christian faith, the apostolic faith, if you will, that you can feel safe by following them. Doesn't mean blindly that you should check them and make sure that what they're doing. What?
I'm just going to get my jacket.
For verse 2. For in many things we offend all. I'll read the whole verse. For in many things we offend all. If any man offend not in word, the same is a perfect man, and able also to bridle the whole body. Now, of course, you read the rest of this chapter, and you know what's coming and what James is beginning to set us up for. Teachers tend to, at times, to avoid theology, avoid deep doctrine and deep tenets of the faith, simply because they're lazy to start off with. And secondly, people don't have a very long attention span in learning the scriptures. When I was in a denomination for 40 plus years, I discovered, and it was no big shock, that 80% of the members of the congregation I was pastoring never picked up a Bible. And, they just become so vulnerable and become so easy to mislead. So that's why you have to be careful. Teachers at times tend not to get too deep because the people are not responsive. And that's both the teacher's fault in not making it palatable and the listener's fault for not wanting to study. I'm tutoring a young girl, and very smart, very smart, very high, probably has a higher intelligence than I do. And we last year brought her up from failing to all A's and B's, and now at the last of the school year, she's been thrown back at me, and we've got to try to work on it, and we already have her up to A's and B's, and what she get, like 2 C's or something. So she's getting back up there. But her problem is not intelligence. Her problem is not comprehension. Her problem is concentration and reading and understanding it. And we live in a video world now, and the attention span is like about 15 seconds. And I try to take that into consideration in sermons, because I know anything over 15 seconds, people will come back to me that I was their pastor 20 years ago, and they'll say, I remember that sermon about, and I'll say, what did you remember about it? And you know what they tell me? They tell me an illustration that I gave. But as far as the actual message and what I was trying to get to, sometimes is lost. So it's the same thing with we Christians. We really don't want to study. We just want to look at the book and have it jump out and in our heads and be able to take the test. It takes great care not to contribute and not to contradict our own theology. So that's why we have to be careful when we're teaching that we don't contradict. We are teaching the mysteries of the faith. And those that we are teaching, some are mature Christians, some are new Christians, some, are still trying to figure out if they even want to be Christians. So that's where we are. And that is leading us into verse 3, and James jumps right into it. Behold, we put bits in the horses' mouths, that they may obey us, and we may turn their whole body. James begins with an illustration, with a story. And so everybody in their mind has a picture of a horse. And if you've ever ridden a horse, you put the bit in their mouth and it goes all the way up to the back. And then there's reins coming off that horse. And then when you mount the horse with the saddle, the horse has been trained that if you take the reins and lean to the right, then it'll go to the right, and then all the different movements. So that's not a new science. That's something that's been going on for thousands of years. So just picture in your mind, if you would, Preacher James, Reverend James, or Bishop James standing behind a pulpit in the first century in a synagogue-type form. And he begins his sermon, and he begins by saying, behold, we put bits in the horses' mouths. Of course, everybody, what in the world is he going to talk about today? What's he saying? That they may obey us, and we turn about their whole body. Okay, where's he going to go with this? One small device, he's beginning to share with us, controls the whole horse. I guess one of the favorite things that I like to watch, even though I don't drink Budweiser beer, is their wagon with all of the, what kind of horses are those?
Clydesdales.
Clydesdale.
Clydesdale.
And, they're just beautiful animals. But I don't know how many of them there's 8 or 10, something like that. But you look at the guy driving them, and he's just got 2 reins. And, he controls that whole massive horse. The other one was this, maybe Hal will remember it, but I think the rest of you are a lot younger. But there used to be a television show that 20 mule team pulled the wagon, and there was actually 20 mules that just pulled one wagon, and they hauled it across the desert. And I think, what were they carrying? Water or supply? Borax.
Yeah.
That's what they were carrying. All right. Verse 4. Behold, you don't understand that illustration? Then James says, let me give you another one. You've never had a horse before, but I know a lot of you have been on a ship, so let me share this with you. Behold also the ships, which though they be great, that is a lot of tonnage, a lot of displacement in the water, and are driven of fierce winds, yet are they turned about with a very small helm, whithersoever the governor listeth. Wherever he steers it is the way. And I think 2 weeks ago I shared the story of the Bismarck, the German warship that lost its rudder and was taken over by a small British frigate. Well, let's talk about the pulpit where James is preaching from. And he's using the illustration of a ship. If you've ever been on a sailboat, a sail ship, of an older one, there is what they call the pulpit or the helm. Same thing. On that helm is a wheel, a steering wheel. And ages ago, there were ropes leaving from a pulley down through the deck, down to the hull, and did a quick turn with pulleys and eventually connected to a rudder. They learned early on that they could actually use a tackle system, what's it called? Engineer? Rope and tackle, like a come along. Where you use pulleys and you double up the length of the rope or the cable, and just with a little pull on it, you can move a mass. Well, they learned that these rudders were very, very difficult to control, especially if you got in a rough sea or rough water, so they block and tackle. That's what I'm trying to think of. So they learned the technique of block and tackle, and it was easier to steer. Now, here comes the mystery and the secret of the pulpit, and why we call that a pulpit. The pulpit, the helm, was connected not to the deck, but it went all the way down to the center board, or to the center line where the gussets come out from the boat. And from the wheel of that ship, through the ropes, and that pulpit being connected directly to the bottom of the boat, the helmsman, the captain, the one that was steering, could feel everything going on in that boat. That if they were a good helmsman, they could tell you when the current was changing. Some of them were so good that they could tell you when they were getting into shallow water or when they were going into blue water, deep water. And they could read the water, and they could also read the ship, what it was going, what it was doing, and what it was getting ready to go through, what it had been through, what it currently is going through, and what it in the future, very short time, would be going through. And that's why it's called, why we have a pulpit. That's the job of the person behind that pulpit, is to feel, to sense, to read what's going on in the congregation. All right? So he's telling us in verse 4 that a small rudder on a big ship will steer that ship. Verse 5. Even so the tongue, whoa, he doesn't waste much time jumping into it, does he? Even so the tongue is a little member. So now we've got a bit in our mouth and we have a rudder in our mouth. And now he's telling us we have a tongue in our mouth. And boasteth great things. Behold, how great a matter a little fire kindleth. So you start a little fire, and before you know it, it's out of control. And, you know, you've got problems on your hand. When we were clearing our property, Fawn and I cleared our own property to build our own house. One block at a time and one log at a time. There was a big tree that we had cut it down, and the only thing, it was rotten. The only thing left was a stump that was about 5 foot tall. And I was tired of chopping on it. And I said, well, we'll just clear out the land around us. And I shouldn't say this publicly, but let's pour some gasoline on it. And let's wait a few minutes and stand afar and light it. And we did. And before we knew it, that whole tree was on fire. Well, in about 2 minutes, there was also the fire department. And they came running out of there with the hose, and I said, wait. I said, you know, we've got it cleared out. There's no danger of sparks. Just let it burn out. No, we got to put it out. So they put it out. So it started off with one little tiny fire. So we have already begun to learn what he was going to be talking about as far as the tongue. It's a little member, and it boasteth great things. It talks about things. But, boy, I tell you what, it can get you in trouble. In dealing with the public and congregation and community for most of my grown-up life, I've learned one thing about Rick. I think 1% of the time that I've got into trouble is because of something that I've done. 99% of the time that I've got into trouble, it's because of something that I've said, right? And I'm not telling you that if I was right or wrong or truth or non-truth. I'm just telling you what my tongue has given to me through all the years, all right? And I think that statistic is probably pretty true about me. Now, you may not have gotten in as much trouble as I have, but anyway. Our tongue can do the same to our bodies. We can have the appearance of godliness. Remember that German Bismarck battleship? It had the appearance of a great war machine. And look like we have faith, but we open our mouths and it's all over. All right? It goes down the tubes. Verse 6. And the tongue is a fire. Now, he's already given us the illustration of what a small fire can do. Rick burning down that tree stump. Fire department showing up. And the tongue is a fire, the world of iniquity. Wow, that's a pretty big indictment. Indictment on the body. So is the tongue among the rest of the world. Doesn't say that, does it? Who's James preaching to? He's preaching to his church. And the doors are closed. And he is saying, among our members. I've heard it said many times, and I didn't say it, I wish I did, but 99% of the Christian churches today, if they had the Apostle Paul as pastor, he probably wouldn't last more than a week. All right? And the same with James. Okay? We've just become so sophisticated in linguistics that that's how we act. And the tongue is a fire, a world of iniquity, and so is the tongue among our members, that it defileth the whole body. The tongue can start immeasurable trouble if it is not under control. And I will give you with lies, with rumors, with gossip, with being offensive. All of these are non-Christian ways. Pastored a church where every year the ladies of the church had a bake sale. And it was a big deal. It was more than Wednesday night prayer meeting and Sunday night church. But boy, they worked on weeks, and they brought in their pies and their cakes and their brownies and their cookies and all this fancy stuff. Well, they had one of these bake sales, as they did every year, several years before that. And I was going over a list that had been handed to me of people that used to be members, but they no longer came. And so every once in a while, I would just take a glance at it. I didn't spend a whole lot of time with it, but I figured they quit coming to church for a good reason, and they had been visited many times. So, you know, I needed to spend my time on people that were going to be active and working in the church and in the community. So they laid out all of these pies and everything, and I just happened, and I think it was inspired, to come across this one lady's name. And I asked somebody, I said, how come this lady doesn't come to church anymore? Now remember, I'm getting ready for this bake sale. It's about 2 or 3 days before. I mean, it took up the whole church parking lot, everything. Well, she baked the cake and nobody bought it. So I decided to go around and visit this lady. And I went around, she just lived like about more than 2 blocks from the church, and I walked over there from the parsonage, and so I visited her, and I think I had seen her once before and saw her downtown a lot, always spoke to her. She was very nice, very pleasant. And I said, would you mind telling me why you quit coming to church? I said, if you'll tell me, I promise that I will not bug you anymore, and I will not ask you. I've asked you 3 times to come to church, and that's 1 more time than what I'm under conviction to ask you for. Now, I'll put myself in front of you, and so I'll remind you non-verbally that I'm the pastor, and hopefully that will put you under conviction, and you'll come to church. And she said, Pastor, all right. She said, I'm going to tell you. She said, I baked a cake several years ago, and it was a nice cake. It was a red velvet cake. Now, if you've never had red velvet cake, then you've never had cake. I don't like cake myself, but I like red velvet cake. And she said it didn't sell, and I had to take it home. And I heard some ladies, some of preacher, your ladies, that were giggling and saying, nobody bought her cake. It must be really bad. How could they even say that? They never even tasted it. I said, I'll tell you what. You bake another red velvet cake, and I'll make sure that it gets sold. And I said, now you're going to have to come to the bake sale. Now here's the deal. If it sells, you've got to come to church next week. Well, okay, I guess I've got nothing to lose. She made the red velvet cake. I was out there with my ladies, and I watched the cookies go, and I watched the brownies go, and I watched the lemon meringue pies go. I watched the pecan pies go, and we were down to about 5 or 6 items. So there was a guy in the church, and I went over to him, and I said, I don't care, and I talked out the side of my mouth. I said, I don't care how you do it. I don't care. That red velvet cake has to be gone in the next 30 seconds. You understand? He said, yes, sir, preacher. And so he went around there and he bought the cake. So she had to come to church. And she started coming back to church after she'd been out several years. Those little ladies in my church were well-meaning. But man, some of them had some tongues on them. And like I've used the illustration before, they could take it out of their mouth, wrap it around the church 3 times, tie 2 knots in it, and put it in their pocket. And that's just Gossip. Gossip, rumors, and untruths have torn more churches apart than any other one thing, the tongue. Rarely do you see a church that is split because of, Fawn just put her foot on the camera in case you wondered why I was shaking.
Well,
Rarely have I ever seen a church split over theological reasons. I have yet to see a church get into an argument over theology. What we get into arguments about are the colors that the women paint the bathroom, where we're going to put the chairs, how come the church wasn't cleaned properly, how come the preacher, not up to his normal par, what's going on? Tongue. And the tongue is a fire, a world of iniquity. So is the tongue among our members that defileth the whole body, the congregation, and setteth on fire the course of nature, and it is set on fire of hell. Wow. He didn't mince any words there, did he? The tongue can start immeasurable trouble if it is not under control. Lies, rumors, gossip. As I shared with you earlier, it's my tongue that's gotten me into trouble. Good and bad trouble. Then, here's when people in the church, members of the church, congregation, this is a buzzword that you need to listen and wait for the atomic bomb to go off. Pastor, I'm just being honest. Watch out. The fur is getting ready to fly, and I have never, in 45 years, well, in 2 years it'll be 50 years, I have never heard anything come good after that statement is made. Now that's a pretty rash statement, isn't it? I'm just being honest. If you're being honest, you don't have to say it. You should already have character, integrity, experience, and truthfulness in your reputation. If you have to guard and defend, then too late. Then you want to ask, but I never have, honest by what standards? Honest by whose standards? Right? Honesty, and this is my quote, honesty without God's love is cruelty. All right? I can kill somebody with honesty. I can ruin their reputation. I can demoralize them. I can hurt them to the point that they would never recover by being honest. I was honest. Yeah, but you were cruel. And the way that you did it served no good purpose. Another one of my favorites is, well, Miss Mabel, bless her heart, blah, 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 blah. Anything that came after Miss Mabel, bless her heart, was not going to be good. Miss Mabel, bless her heart, she cannot cook worth anything. Miss Ruth, bless her heart, she just does not know how to clean her house. By saying, bless her heart, you can get away with murder. And that's what they do. That's what the tongue does. That's what we're still talking about, is the tongue. Verse 7. Well, James won't leave it alone. He keeps diving into it. For every kind of beast, and of birds, and of serpents, and of things in the sea is tamed. Now, I've often wondered about this verse, and I know I've seen them tamed. I've been to SeaWorld, and I've seen dolphins trained, and some of the big whales, the blue whales, have been trained to a certain extent. I don't know, wonder what they trained back in the first century. I've been on the Sea of Galilee and there's no whales there. There's St. Peter's fish and there's a lot of other kind of fish, sturgeon fish. But anyway, James knew that fish could be tamed and hath been tamed of mankind. We can tame lions, elephants, tigers, apes. Hardly no member of the animal kingdom hasn't been trained or tamed. Y'all ever seen a flea circus? There was a man years ago that made a model of a 3-ring circus, and he filled it with fleas. And he swore up and down, and you had to pay 25 cents to get in to see his flea circus, which was in the circus. And he had these fleas trained that would go from one tent to the other tent. Now, of course, it was a trick, and he had a little blower fan underneath that first tent that had a little plenum chamber, and it just give a gentle breeze, and it would blow those fleas over to the next tent, and then they would do that again in that tent. They would go. It was a flea circus. So everything in the animal kingdom has been trained. I've heard people that said that they've been able to train cockroaches. So anyway, but the tongue, we've got all these wild examples, but the tongue can no man tame. It is an unruly evil, full of deadly poison. Man finds that the most difficult thing to train in his body is his tongue. Now, there's all kinds of evil tongues. You may be surprised to hear about some of them. First one is a flattering tongue. Now, this is one that, being in the public eye, being pastor of churches, that I have watched out for. When the bishop appointed me to a new parish, and of course people show up sometimes before that church service. In the denomination that I served, you always moved on a Thursday. Every preacher in the conference moved on, if they were going to move, moved on a Thursday. And you had to leave your old parsonage, be packed up, be in your new parsonage before they said before dark. That didn't always happen. And the people that I always watched out for were those that showed up on Thursday. Not to help me unload, but to check me out. And to find out who and what I looked like and what my family looked like. And when I got out of the truck, this is a conversation that I heard more than once. Oh, Dr. Chandler, you just don't know how glad we are that you have showed up. You know what? The church is on its final legs. We don't know if we're even going to be able to go for another week. And we know that you are going to straighten it out. And that we are going to regain the large congregation that we had in blah, blah, blah. That is the kind of tongue that James is saying, watch out for. That is a flattering tongue. And I'm here to tell you that those people that talked the nicest about me the first week or two, are you ready for this? Were usually the first ones to go. All right? Because they could not stand the pressure. They could not work under the conviction. They wanted me to come in and straighten their church out and make it grow again with worldly and secular devices. And that's not how I grew my churches. Now, I'm not boasting and I'm not bragging, but I never left a church that didn't have more members or was out of financial trouble. But I built it through study, through the Word. And because some people did not want to get involved in that, they went to easier listening with itching ears church, okay? The tongue is a hard thing to train, and we preachers are not immune from that. One of the things that we have to be careful of, more so than you, is that if a member has wronged us, which happens, right? When I was full-time in larger churches, it happened a lot. And sometimes it happened on purpose. Sometimes it happened, they didn't even know what they were doing. But I had to be careful when I got up there. Because sometimes it would have been so easy to turn that into a bully pulpit and to use it as a switch or as a whip with my hidden agenda that would not be so hidden. And so there were times that I did not compromise the gospel, but there were times where if I read a particular verse, it could have come across as a whip. Now that didn't mean that I put that verse to sleep and never use it again. I would come at it from a different direction. That's being a pastor, all right? You gotta watch those kind of things. Flattering tongue for a hidden agenda. You gotta watch out for that. A snake. Well, bless Miss Little Mary's heart, you know. Then you gotta watch out for the boasting tongue. One that would give false hope. And one that says if you'll just do this, you'll feel better about yourself and you'll grow and blah, 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 blah. It's empty, all right? And of course, you have to watch out for a lying tongue. Have to watch out for the tongue that will entrap you. Mr. Rick, are you still beating your wife? All right, that's, you know, how do you answer that? That's entrapment. So watch out for that kind of tongue. Now, it'll come across sometimes, not that outwardly, but people can be very conniving and they can lead you step by step into doing something you don't want to do. They can use that tongue to deceive, tell half a story. You know, no good lie is a good lie without 50% of the truth in it. If you just tell me an outright lie, I'll say, well, that's a lie. But if you sprinkle some truth in it, then, you know, you got sun coming in your, do you need to move over?
No.
You sure?
Puts the light on.
For those of you that are watching it, we keep moving the study around, and I haven't seen what it looks like, but it's probably not a half bad. The sides of our church are all glass. So you're looking out into a field and trees. To deceive. We can bless God and curse man at the same time. Now that was a lie I just told you. There wasn't any truth to that at all. You cannot bless God and curse man at the same time. Doesn't work. Why? Because man is made after the image of God. Verse 10. Out of the same mouth proceedeth blessing and cursing. My brethren, these things ought not so to be. Can't be. All right, I told you a lie. Because I knew what was coming up in the next verse. All right. Verse 11. Then, you know, James was, had a lady leave church one time, and she said, you know, you just give so many illustrations. Well, you didn't understand those either, so I don't know what. Verse 11, doth a fountain send forth at the same place sweet water and bitter? No. Can a crabapple tree produce gala apples? My dog is a golden retriever, and she's purebred, and she has the personality and disposition of every woman I've ever known in my life, including my wife. And she has to be treated with kid gloves. And one thing I've discovered is that she loves apples. And she will eat the whole thing, core, stem, everything. I try to take the stem out. And it just disappears. And I don't know if you've checked the price of apples at Publix recently, but for a cheap bag with only 7 or 8 apples in it is about $5.
Try Aldi's.
Huh?
Try Aldi's.
Okay. You a walking advertisement for Aldi's. I like black olives, and she says don't get them at Publix, get them at Aldi's. So next time I go to Aldi's, I will do that. So the other day I went to Publix, and the price was still up there, and I saw some kind of apples. I don't know what they were, but they were only about that big. But they were like $3.59. And I said, well, I'll just get a bag of those suckers and I can save some money because she'll eat 1 or 2 a day. And so I brought them home and took one out of the bag, and she saw it, and she can jump so high, she jumps off her hind legs and went out to the front porch on her little mat that she has. And I gave her that apple, and she took one bite out of it, and you would not believe the look on a golden retriever's face. It was, are you kidding me? And she took that apple and spit it out of her mouth as to tell me, you're not going to fool me. I saw a joke where golden retriever's talking to its master, talking to another golden retriever. And the statement is, has your master ever taken a treat and broken it in half and tried to trick you and tell you that it was the whole trick? Can bitter water come out of and be sweet water out of the same fountain? Can a fig tree, my brethren, bear olive berries, either a vine or figs? So can no fountain both yield salt water and fresh? All right? So you got to check the water to make sure that it's fresh water if that's what you want to drink. We had taken our boat and gone over to the Bahamas. And one thing you have to be careful of over there is just because you see a faucet doesn't mean that it's fresh water. And we were low on water, and there was, remember that? And there was a faucet right there on the dock. Well, everywhere you go in the Bahamas, you buy water. There's no free water in the Bahamas. And so I saw this thing, and our tank was empty, and I have a 100-gallon tank, and so I said, honey, look at this, and I'll fill our tank up. Well, I did, and we turned the faucet up on and took a drink of that, and I had a freshwater tank full of salt water. So spent the next couple hours flushing out the freshwater tank. So look at the faucet. Look at the tongue talking to you. As a Christian, you hear, well, you're not to judge. Yes, you are to judge. Yes, you are to inspect. You are to weigh. You are to discriminate the words coming out of somebody else's mouth. All right? And that includes the preaching. In verses 9 through 12 are all giving us comparisons. Fountain with sweet water, bitter water, figs producing olives, vines making figs, ocean, salt water to fresh water. What our tongues ought to be doing is that they ought to be truthful, they ought to be praising, they ought to be edifying, they ought to be teaching, encouraging, confirming, ensuring, undergirding, consistent, sympathizing, compassionate, patient, silent, and thoughtful. Those are the godly reasons for why God put a tongue in our mouth. And then we hear something coming out as well. Trying to see where I put that sword. Anyway. Verse 13. Who is a wise man and endued with knowledge among you? Doesn't say education. Doesn't say degree. Now let's learn what the biblical word for knowledge means. It means as a husband knows his wife, as the wife knows her husband. Knowledge is an intimate, personal relationship. Anytime you see that word knowledge in the Bible, it's just like when you see the word brethren. It is referring to a spiritual relationship. It's not talking about education, not talking about degrees or any of that kind of stuff. So when James uses the word knowledge, right offhand, I forgot the Greek word for knowledge. Who is the wise man and endued with knowledge among you? Let him show out of a good conversation. Listen to him. Listen to what he says. His works with meekness of wisdom. Somebody that does not beat you over the head with the Bible. We pass a church every time we come into our church. And every saying they put up on our board offends me. It's just hitting me on the head with the Bible. And, you know, if I was a non-Christian, that certainly would not. Of course, now those churches draw in a lot of people. You know, there are a lot of churches that are just plain mean and just hit you over the head with the Bible. And if you don't do this, you're going to bust hell wide open. Well, yeah, that may be true. But that's not the way to turn somebody around. So listen and see. Who is qualified among you to teach? True wisdom does not step on another person to elevate their own ideas and their own intellect. I listened to a preacher one time, and I'm telling you the honest truth, I didn't understand every other word that he said. But they were big words. He's dead now. I'm trying to think of the commentator, the ultra-conservative that used to be on the radio. Gosh, I can't think of it. But he always had a clipboard and held it in front of him as he would interview people. And he would ask them a question, and I didn't even understand the question he was asking. But he was an intellectual, and a world-renowned intellectual. And I used to listen to him just to listen to some of the words he used, and then tried to look them up and didn't understand. That's not what we're talking about here as far as finding a teacher. Anybody can take a hard subject and make it hard and teach it hard. But what James is saying here is that a teacher is one that can take a hard subject and make it understandable. That's what the job of the teacher is. In one of the majors that I took in college, which was psychology, I had to take two quarters. That was on the quarter system back then. 2 quarters of statistics. Well, I put it off until my senior year in the very last thing because you hear the word statistics and what goes through your mind? You just, oh my gosh, and you break out into a cold sweat. So the professor walked in that day, and he was about the same age as I was at the time, and 26, 27 years old. and young guy, and was operating on rats at that time, and was experimenting by trying to transfer a brain from one rat into another rat. I mean, that was big stuff. This was at Georgia, and he did it one time, and the rat lived for like a day. So I mean, he was an expert in what he did. Remember the difference between psychology and sociology? And I have a degree in both of them. Psychology is the study of how the human mind works inside of itself, how it reacts to stimuli from the outside. Sociology is the interaction of humans with each other. All right? And that's the difference. So he walked into class, all of us scared to death, would not even look at it, had our hands folded on the desk. And he said, everybody listen to me. And I want to teach you something right now, the first day of class. If you will listen, if you will do what I tell you to do, if you will do your homework, and we will start off so easy you will think it's funny. But I guarantee you when you leave this class, this was the first class, you will never look at this world with the same eyes again. He had my attention. I mean, I was already a student pastor. That's what I wanted to hear. He started us off with arithmetic and variables and plus and minuses. I did my homework every night, took the test, and would you believe that I not only passed that course, but I got an A in it. And so did most of the students. He took a difficult subject and he broke it down because his goal was not for us to find out how smart he was. His goal was when we left his class, we would understand statistics. And I never look at anything in this world the same way again. Whether it's commercials, whether somebody is saying something, whether it's an advertisement, makes no difference. That's what James is doing with his congregation. You see what he's doing? He is growing a congregation. It's brand new. Christianity is brand new. He's got Gentiles and Jewish converts. He's got to start them off with adding and subtracting. Right? Even if, well, let's look at verse 14. But if ye have bitter envying and strife in your hearts, glory not, and lie not against the truth. Even if you know the truth, but don't use wisdom in teaching, it does not serve God's purpose. My job at New Light is not to tell you how smart I am or how much truth I hold. My job and my aim and purpose and goal and motive and agenda is to serve the Lord and His purpose in this church, whether I've got 2 people or whether I've got 100. Makes no difference, okay? And I have pastored churches that had hundreds, and I've pastored churches that had 30 or 40, okay? So, but you do the same thing. You know, I've preached in churches where I had former school teachers, my school teachers, and that will test you. So you have to put self-righteousness aside, judgmentalness, you have to put arrogance aside. You need to learn how to step on toes without messing up the shine. Verse 15, this wisdom descendeth not from above, that is if you're doing it the wrong way, but is earthly, sensual, and devilish. So watch out for those spigots that have salt water running out of them. This type of wisdom demeans our purpose. it wins no people. So I looked at a preacher, well, I won't say friend, but he was an acquaintance, and he was, we were talking about sermons or how we deliver them or whatever. He said, here, I'll show you what I do. And he showed me his sermon, and it was pretty much manuscript. But I saw off in the margin that he had written something. And I said, what's that? He said, oh, that's where I remind myself to raise my hand. Oh my gosh. You know, if you have to. Verse 16. For where envying and strife is, there is confusion and every evil work. Still talking about the tongue. It causes confusion, disunity, schisms. Verse 17, and we've got about 2 or 3 more minutes. But the wisdom that is from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, and easy to be entreated, full of mercy, good fruits, without partiality. Remember, James has addressed partiality up there in the first chapter. And without hypocrisy. True wisdom is from God. We can know the truth, but not know how to teach it. And so our job as Christians, as we share, as we witness, as we testify, we got to know where that person is. We got to know who they are. We got to know where they're coming from. We got to know something about them. I'll end with one story, and then next week we'll pick up on that last verse. One of the colleges that I went to, Georgia Southern, which is now a university. When I went to it, it was just a college. And I won't tell you a sad story, but I mean, I didn't have 2 pennies to run together. And sometimes I'd go in the cafeteria just to watch other people eat and think maybe that would take care of my stomach. But I was sitting down there by myself, and about 4 of these good-looking undergraduate girls came running toward me. Now remember, I'm about 27 years old. And these young girls, 18, 19, come running towards me. And so they're just like flashing me. And they come and they all sit down. And they begin to give me the 4 gospel laws, I think they're called. You are a sinner. You must repent. Will you accept Christ, Jesus, as your Lord and Savior? And there's 4 laws that they had printed out on a little card. And they began to preach to me. And you got to do this. And they ended up by saying, can we pray with you? But no, can we pray for you? And I said, well, yeah, I guess so. But I need to ask you a question before you pray for me. And they said, well, sure. What's your question? And I said, what's my name? They just looked at me. What's my name? You see what I was trying to teach them way back yonder? Was that if you're going to witness to somebody, you're going to testify, you need to find out who you're talking to. Some new person comes into church. I don't ask them about their faith. I don't ask them about their theology. We're not there yet. Where do you work? What do you do? What's your history? What do you like? What are your hobbies? Where do you come from? Where are you living? Because my job is to get inside that person. Not maliciously, but to find out how am I going to reach them? At what depth, at what length do I need to go to reach them? Where are they? Sometimes they slip through, you know. Sometimes I don't get that far. But that's the way it is. I'm sorry that I have not looked at y'all more. Maybe next week we need to put the camera where I can look at both them. And
We'll see.
we'll see. Well, maybe just remind me, maybe point to that, but
Not gonna do it.
not gonna do it. But there's a lot of you out there, obviously, so, I think we had 52 last week. So, anyway, thank you. And I am trying to include you. Let me pray for you, even though I don't know your name. Father, it's always a time of spiritual delight, a time of spiritual refreshment, a time of spiritual renewal, a time of spiritual awakening, to open up your word and to allow it and to invite it to come into our spiritual souls. We thank you for feeding us and for giving us the much needed spiritual food that we need to live in this ungodly world. Watch over us and keep us, forgive us of all of our sins, and it's in Jesus' name that we do pray. Amen.
Amen.
Next week will be last of chapter 3, and it gets deeper and it gets funner. I think I told